and Damien's here for Senator Hester. Anything you would care to add to what Lindsay just told us?
No, I don't have anything to add from what Lindsay just said. I do think that Damien might add, and I'm certainly sure the department too, but I have nothing more to add. I appreciate all the work that the Senate did on the bill.
Thank you. Damien, anything to add?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. Who else is here to discuss this bill? Just raise your hand and I will recognize you. Okay, I see Judy Urban. I see Patrick Mulford. Judy, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I am Judy Urban, Director of Policy for DGS, Department of General Services, Office of State Procurement. I just want to ensure that DGS, as the control agency for IT, is included in working with the consultant to evaluate technology procurement methods going forward. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Lindsay, is that covered currently in the bill?
Yeah, that was one of the amendments that I discussed that originally the bill was drafted with DO-IT hiring the consultant in consultation with DGS. So now it's DGS hiring the consultant in consultation with DO-IT.
Okay.
So it's flipped around.
All right.
Thank
So
you.
we've satisfied that concern. Hi, Patrick, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that we did send some amendments in, and I appreciated Lindsay working those in. We are currently discussing one amendment with OLA, and hopefully we'll have that have some language fixed for that. But it is the amendment on page 5, lines 14 through 17. 16 and 17 are taken out. We're working with OLA on that language, but that's the only one that I think we've heard any pushback from.
Okay.
And we had a conversation this morning that it went longer than we thought, and we're going to kind of, both sides are going to try to figure out a compromise on that.
Okay, couple of different ways we can go with this. If there are no other concerns other than that, we can always accept a change during the full committee vote.
Okay.
All right, Delegate Hill.
Yeah, I'm sorry. OLA, Office of Legislative Audits, is that what we're talking about? That you're working out?
Yes, Delegate.
And what's the nature that you're trying to work out?
It is a differing of ideas over what oversight is. The department believes that program management and project and program management does not fall underneath oversight, and it is a different function than the oversight function that is mentioned in the bill. We're trying to figure out wording on how to include the and Vicky, please tell me if I'm off track here, but how to include the ability for the secretary to delegate that program and project management function.
Okay, Vicky, are you able to comment?
Yeah, that's correct. There have been, and I don't think I'm sharing too much. There's an audit coming out next week on DO-IT, conducted by the Office of Legislative Audits, and so we're trying to make sure that the language addresses the concerns that are going to be in the audit that's released next week.
So as not to perpetuate problems that are already existing.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, and if I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Delegate Hill.
Is this an issue of who should be responsible for the oversight? Or when you said how you can delegate it, is it supposed to still be housed within DO-IT, but you want to be able to delegate it? Or is it that you don't want it to be housed, oversight of those things you don't want to be housed in DO-IT?
So not oversight. This is kind of the confusion here. DO-IT actually sees oversight and project management as two separate things, because we believe that oversight would oversee project management, and we believe that the project management should be with the units of government who these projects will be at. So let's say DGS and the Emma project, or let's say DNR and a project at DNR. They would project manage the IT project there, while DoIT would conduct oversight over finances and timelines, as well as their project management. So those are the differing ideas that we're having, and I believe OLA believes that that project management should fall underneath oversight. So we're trying to figure out that wording right now.
Okay. Can I ask, Mr. Chair, Vicky, would this be analogous to general services having basic rules that all the departments have to follow? Is that an analogous thing, or it's very different?
It's similar in some ways and different in others. It's similar in that there will be agencies who have the internal capacity to move forward with the project, and so allowing the secretary to be able to make the determination that, yeah, that internal capacity exists, and we'll take a step back from direct involvement, but there will be projects where they probably do need to be directly involved in the project management, because there is an internal capacity. And so the question, I guess that the question then falls, if there is an internal capacity at an agency and DoIT does not have the capacity given all their other projects, what happens to that project? Does it stop? Does it go forward even though we know it has issues? Yeah, those are sort of what we're trying to work out.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Patrick and Vicky, does this situation have implications beyond this particular bill?
Procurement wise, I don't think so. There's a study. The bill is originally introduced, changed procurement for IT projects for a number of them. That part has been amended out. But there is still a study, and you heard the DGS liaison mention that looking at how to expedite IT procurement projects.
Okay.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, go ahead, Delegate Hill.
Thank you. So I'm just going to throw this out and then I'll shut up. Is it something along the lines of saying that the Secretary of DoIT, if they feel, if a particular project in conjunction with the secretary of another department or something, if they agree that the capacity exists, then they can have sort of written agreement in terms of the oversight will be carried, the management of the project and so forth. Something like that, because I think what was said is you're trying to figure out what the language would be to delegate, or are you saying that it's not, that it wouldn't be in conjunction with, so it would be, if MIA feels like they have capacity and DoIT agrees, then DoIT would agree that MIA would do oversight, but must report back to the secretary, and at some point the secretary could always pull that back. Is it like that, or not so much?
It's essentially, and Patrick, feel free to jump in as well, but it's essentially the notion that DoIT does not have the capacity to do the day-to-day project management of every single IT project out there. However, before an agency, sort of is given the green light, I think what legislative audits is saying is you should make sure the capacity is there internally to be able to do it, be able to move forward on the project and have it be successful.
And so part of the question is whether the secretary of DoIT should be the sole person that determines whether they have that capacity, or whether there's another entity or an agreement that the capacity exists. Is that part of it? Is who gets to determine whether that is adequate capacity is there?
Yeah, I mean, currently there's not a requirement, which I think is going to be a part of some of the findings that are going to be in the audit next week. That under current law, there isn't that determination isn't currently made formally, and so the bill, as amended, would say that has to be done.
Because I think that dealing with DoIT before this year, I mean, I know when we did some of these bills last year, part of the challenge, I know when I discussed it with Senator Hester is there was just a sense, and I don't know where Delegate Kaiser was on this, there was a sense that many of the bills we were putting through last year were dealing with a do-it that really said that they could do things and it was duplicative, but we could see that they didn't have the capacity to handle the things they claimed that they could have. And I think this is a new interpretation of do it, and we're trying to give it these powers, but we want to make sure that they're not going to be overly effusive about their ability to do
Right.
it. Okay,
Now I understand.
all right, thank you.
Delegate Shalega?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Did I hear you say, Vicky, we're waiting for an audit that will be out next week?
Mhm.
So should we just hold this bill, Chair Kerr, and come back to it next week if we need to address some of that language in the bill?
My preference, Delegate Shalega, would be to get done what we can get done today, and then if we find out something from the upcoming audit, we can take that up with the full committee at the voting session.
Okay, thanks.
Can I add to that, Mr. Chairman?
Please go ahead, Delegate Kaiser.
And even if we don't find out anything by Monday, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, the Senate bill can be amended on third reader, and my bill still has to go through Senate rules, so they would have time to conform it there. So there would be time. So rather than holding it up now, there would still be time to adjust that definition if there's willingness or need to next week.
Thank you, Delegate Kaiser. Any other discussion on Senate Bill 982? Lindsay, this reprint contains unadopted amendments.
Yes.
Does anyone want to move these amendments?
Move the amendments.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second on the amendments. All in favor of adopting the amendments, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition to these amendments? Do I hear a motion on the bill as amended?
Move favorable. Second.
Second.
Hey, we have a motion for a favorable report on Senate Bill 982 and a second. All in
Can we
favor?
modify that to say with the caveat that, I mean, we've said it, but can the motion be with the caveat that that we will be awaiting some additional amendments to be discussed in the full committee?
Is that necessary, Lindsay?
No, not really. I mean, so the
Okay.
subcommittee is making a recommendation on these amendments, and anyone is free to offer amendments in the full committee voting session as well for the full
Thank
committee
you.
to consider.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
And thanks for the question, Delegate Hill. So we have a motion and a second on the bill as amended. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition to this bill as amended? Seeing none, Senate Bill 982 and its companion bill, House Bill 1188, will move on to the full committee with a favorable subcommittee report. Let's now move on to Senate Bill 818 and its companion bill 1271.
So again, for the purposes of discussion, I'm referring to Senate Bill 818 and a reprint that I circulated. That reprint does have additional changes beyond what came from the Senate. So for everyone's clarification, the bill expands the responsibilities of the Secretary of Information Technology and DO-IT as they relate to the procurement and use of artificial intelligence by state agencies, including the establishment of AI policies and procedures, requires public senior higher education institutions to establish policies and procedures related to the development, procurement, and use of AI, requires units of state government to conduct data inventories of systems that use AI, and impact assessments of data systems that use AI, authorizes and establishes a process for proof of concept procurements, codifies the AI subcabinet of the Governor's Executive Council, and requires the subcabinet to develop an AI roadmap and complete a report on the subcabinet. The amendments, and I'm going to try and refer to page numbers so you can follow along. These are changes being made to the Senate bill. So this is not reflecting the Senate amendments. These are changes that are different from the Senate bill as it came over. On page 9, there's changes to the definitions of high-risk AI, impact assessment, rights impacting AI, and safety impacting AI. Notably here, high-risk AI and impact assessments would be clarified under regulations adopted by DO-IT in consultation with the governor's AI subcabinet. And then throughout the bill, references to rights impacting and safety impacting are changed to high risk. So high risk is defined in terms of to include safety impacting and rights impacting AI. But otherwise, those terms are changed throughout the bill to high risk. On page 10, the amendments alter the exemption for public senior higher education institutions and BCCC to exempt only AI used solely for a research or academic purpose, requires the institutions to establish policies and procedures for high-risk AI for research or academic purposes that are functionally compatible with those adopted by DO-IT, and requires the institutions to report annually to DO-IT on high-risk AI for research or academic purposes. On page 11, the amendments alter the timeline for impact assessments by units of state government by pushing the initial required dates back 1 year and then the follow-up report back 5 months. On page 12, DO-IT is required to consult with the governor's AI subcabinet when adopting policies and procedures relating to high-risk AI by a unit and alters the requirements for the policies and procedures. Notably here, they are required to ensure that use of a system that employs AI by a unit is governed by adequate guardrails and requires the notice from DO-IT and guidance to impacted individuals or groups only if DO-IT is notified that an individual or group may have been negatively impacted. On page 13, DO-IT must make the policies and procedures publicly available on their website within 45 days of their adoption. Also on page 13, the amendments alter the date after which a unit of state government is prohibited from deploying a new system that employs AI unless it complies with those policies and procedures to July 1st. So originally it was July 1st. The Senate changed it to January 1st. This amendment moves it back to July 1st, 2025. On pages 14 and 15, the amendments alter the duties of the governor's AI subcabinet. On pages 16 through 18, the amendments strike language that would have exempted certain competitive proof of concept procurements from BPW oversight. And on page 23, the amendments strike language that would have established the intent of the General Assembly that DO-IT evaluate the potential of AI in creating a statewide virtual 311 portal. Delegate Kerr, you're muted.
So we will take up the deleted section on page 23 in a separate bill. Delegate Lewis, you're here with us today. Would you like to say anything about your bill?
Absolutely, and my apologies. I have the camera off because I'm traveling. So you all look lovely, of course. I'm in complete agreement with the amendments. I think this has been worked out since before session, going several months. We talked to the comptroller. I specifically spoke to the comptroller and the treasurer, and we agreed that, while the idea of the proof of concept seems like a novel idea, Board of Public Works is not delaying the implementation of any of these procurements that's coming through, and the risk of creating a vehicle that would allow procurements to circumvent our MBE goals. We just decided that we didn't want to open that Pandora's box. So we encourage them to kind of keep thinking on that. Not to say that it can't come back in another format or another year, but it's not in this bill. We wanted to give DO-IT time, as was stated, to really do the inventory and the assessment as much as possible. We established a way for USM to essentially establish similar policies that are functionally the equivalent of what the subcabinet is going to do, because ultimately AI is being used in a lot of key functions, and we need to make sure there's some controls there. I think the exception we made for them was for academic and specific like research use, which I think there's general agreement for. As this AI use in industry is growing, we want to make sure that Maryland is a leader there. But back office stuff such as admissions, or most of our higher ed has police departments of their own. If they're using these technologies, we want to make sure they have some strong protections in there. We also know that this won't necessarily be the last bite of the apple on this. I think this is a really good effort. Started off by a number of folks within the subcommittee, Senator Hester, of course, and myself, committee council, speaker staff, a lot of folks, and I really appreciate where we're at. The only thing that I think wasn't in there that I would like us to add is, I think, as I would like us to add an exception for our constitutional offices, so that as they are developing their policies, they'll do it with consultation of Do It. That's our comptroller, our AG, and our treasurer, but not necessarily that they are reporting to Do It. I would like some clarification there, just because they're duly elected bodies that are separate constitutional positions. But they would definitely still work in consultation with them in development, the same way USM is going to have functionally equivalent policies. But I really appreciate the work product of the subcommittee.
Thank you, Delegate Lewis. Damian, on behalf of Senator Hester, anything to add before we get to committee questions?
Just an appreciation for everyone who's been involved in this process. It's been a very long deliberation with many folks involved, especially Patrick and Nishant at Do It, and Brad from the governor's office, and Delegate Lewis's office. It's been a real group effort. So we just want to thank everyone for being part of the process.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Delegate Lewis, for the bill. My question is for Lindsay. You mentioned something about USM, and Delegate Lewis mentioned it too, and I just wanted clarification on the exception. So I think I'm understanding that they are excluded when the AI is related to research, but the issues that were brought up to us during the hearing about, well, what about that smart microwave in the dorm? Which
I did my due diligence. This is my third
Hang on.
time.
Delegate
we brought
Shalega,
this.
you're being, you can, there we go. All right, she's interviewing on our subcommittee. But I'm just confirming then that we're making the exception for research and not for the kinds of issues that were brought up during the hearing, like the smart microwave or something else in the dorms. So thank you.
Yeah, and while the exception for the public senior higher education institutions in BCCC, you're right, is limited to research or academic purposes, and then they have to come up with policies and procedures that are functionally equivalent. And while we're on that subject, I just wanted to clarify, Delegate Lewis, that your intent was to also have an exception for the AG, comptroller, and treasurer, but they would also be coming up with functionally equivalent policies, but not reporting to Do It. I just wanted to clarify that point, because the exception for public senior higher education institutions in BCCC does have a report to Do It. So I just want to clarify that.
Okay, Delegate Lewis.
No, thank you for the clarification. It would, I think my ask would, they would develop in consultation with Do It. But I just wanted to make sure that the reporting relationship wasn't that they somehow were reporting up to Do It when they're like a constitutional offices that, ultimately mean they're reporting to the governor too. And just wanted to clarify that. And I know that was something that both the comptroller and the treasurer asked. The Attorney General did not ask, just because they're not following this bill as closely, but once they see that the comptroller and treasurer did ask, that you would ask to be added. So I was like, let's just build some consistency there. So the idea is in consultation with, but no, not reporting to. Correct.
Okay, thank you. I see we have Mark Cather here from the university system. Mark?
Yes, I just wanted to comment to reply to the comments from Delegate Kaiser, as well as the comments from Delegate Lewis. We, at this point, are not concerned about our microwaves and all of our other technology, because the bill has really been restructured to focus entirely on high-risk AI. And we obviously don't feel that a microwave is going to be a high-risk AI at that point, or anything else like that. So while we feel the amendment language that we've submitted is a better fit for our environment, we can certainly work with the language in the amendment as it was sent out last night in the reprint.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Mark. Diamond, anything from the comptroller's office related to Delegate Lewis's request?
No, Delegate Lewis handled it. Justin, do you want to add anything? No, I think that about summarizes it. We were concerned about, the consultation language. And that's, I think, what I saw Lindsay nodding along with Delegate Lewis. So we appreciate the sponsors working with us on this. And I'll kick it over to the treasurer's office if she has any concerns.
Who is here from the treasurer's office?
Mr. Chair, hi, this is Laura
Oh,
Adams.
hi, Laura.
with the
Didn't see
Treasurer's
you.
Office. I just wanted to echo and say me too. Thank you very much to the sponsors for hearing our office's concerns and incorporating our feedback.
Thank you. Daniel Wolf, is this on the same topic?
Not specifically on the USM part. I was going to wait until the end if you had just general comments asking about the bill.
Okay, we'll come back to you then. Maybe before we move on with another topic, Delegate Lewis, are you asking for the subcommittee to adopt your idea in the form of an amendment at this time?
I mean, I would defer to Lindsay. I don't have a ton of bills that go through HDO, so don't know the process, but yes, whatever Lindsay suggests.
Okay.
I'm a yes.
I think this subcommittee has previously voted on conceptual amendments before. It's up to the subcommittee if you all feel comfortable voting in concept without seeing the specific language. But the idea would be that we would add an exception for the AG, the comptroller, and the treasurer, require them to develop policies and procedures that are functionally equivalent, and do that in consultation with DO IT.
Okay, subcommittee. We have two ways to go about this. We can either adopt the conceptual amendment now, if someone would like to move it, or we
Move the conceptual amendment along with the other amendments.
Okay.
Second, but I still have a question.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the conceptual amendment along with all the other amendments. Delegate Hill, your question.
Thank you. So I was going to ask either Delegate Lewis or Senator Hester's office, when we developed, when you were developing the legislation previously, there was a reference to the outside experts council that's included in HB 11, the complementary bill. And was that now taken out, that the sub cabinet is no longer under this legislation seeking or having any advice in terms of guardrails, et cetera, from the other group that the other legislation's creating?
Is that on page 14, Lindsay?
That's what I'm looking for. I can't see it anymore.
I mean, the codification of the AI subcabinet is still in the bill, and then also as DO IT is adopting the policies and procedures, that's done in consultation with the AI subcabinet.
Right.
There's also a report at the end that is required of the AI subcabinet that's developing a roadmap to study various subject areas in relation to AI, and then also a report and recommendations on the sufficiency of the subcabinet to accomplish the artificial intelligence goals of the state and the efficacy of the potential transition of the subcabinet to a department or independent unit of state government.
Right. So the subcabinet is not the group I'm talking about. It we had, in fact, Senator Hester had originally included this group of outside experts, or is that now the subcabinet? I'm confused. I thought the subcabinet would be using that group that's housed at Morgan State to help advise it, or is that group at Morgan State now the subcabinet? Delegate Lewis, you know what I'm asking about.
Yeah, I know exactly. So when we were originally working on the bill, we had a reference, I think, in the uncodified part of the bill,
correct,
to an advisory board to the subcabinet. And originally there was a list of everyone who had to be included. We took all of that out because we knew there was a separate bill that Delegate Hill had been working on for some time, I believe with Morgan State, as well as I want to say UMBC.
Correct.
That was more specific on just more on that. And I
This
think
advisory
part of
council.
what we correct. So I think we pulled that out as to not step on the toes of your other bill. I think we had intended to leave kind of like a reference to it, assuming it would pass, but I don't know if the Senate decided that it wasn't necessary, but I would say in the amendments that, Lindsay and I went over, we hadn't really discussed that. If that reference was taken off, it was taken off in the Senate before it came over. Because we didn't just do that.
Are you referring to the language in the roadmap at the end? So before it was a roadmap, it was a specific study by the AI subcabinet, and it did say in consultation with appropriate stakeholders. And then the various study items listed particular entities that they were supposed to be consulting with. And the roadmap now, or the report on the roadmap rather, requires that to include a list of appropriate stakeholders identified to participate in each study topic. This was feedback from DeWitt on just not specifying the exact entities that they should be consulting with, but just leave it open.
So that's a change, because the discussions, and DeWitt's here, they can speak to it, but the discussions have been, just as Delegate Lewis had said, that Senator Hester put it in. We had we discussed whether to keep it as part, and DeWitt had indicated that they did want to have an advisory council and that would be fine to be a standalone bill. And there was just as Delegate Lewis says, there was a reference to, that they would, in coordination with the advisory council or something of that, where I can pull it from somewhere, but there was an advisory council. And that's why when we presented the bills before the House, both Delegate Lewis and I spoke about them as being complementary, because both the sub-cabinet and the advisory council, which is completely outside of the state, out of the government, the advisory council was to include, and again, we did take out the language that specified the advisory council as a standalone bill. So what you're saying is, Lindsay, if I'm hearing you, is that you were told by DeWitt that they didn't want reference to an advisory council at all?
If I could.
Yeah, Patrick, go ahead if you have a clarification on that.
Yeah, no, the roadmap at the end was changed right before it went over to the House side. I don't think that is what you're referring to, Delegate Hill.
No, I'm not referring to the roadmap.
Yeah, those changes were just about that. It didn't have anything to do with the advisory council. I believe that the change that you're referring to when we took out the advisory council all came out of this bill actually before it even hit the Senate.
No, the advisory council came out. It
Yes.
came out as a standalone, but there had been a reference that had been left in to the fact that there would be an advisory council not defined in this bill that would be existing outside of the state. There is no longer a reference to that. So now the sub-cabinet is working as without that group that had all the stakeholders in it. That the idea was not to remove an advisory council. And again, we were told by DeWitt that they thought that was a good idea. That's what Nishant continued to say. What we did is we took it out of this bill. And now it seems like it's being treated as if it's not important or necessary. So I just want clarification, because that's not what we had talked about. We took it out because we knew getting this bill through, for two reasons. Number one, we knew getting this bill through would be a heavy lift with all the moving pieces. And second of all, as Delegate Lewis said, because I've been working on it for a few years, and everyone had said they thought that it was a necessary, important piece. So I'm just trying to understand, and we can go back and look at the language in Senator Hester's bill, but is there some objection to referencing the fact that there is an undefined in this legislation advisory council that, that the sub-cabinet, and because the other bill references, in other words, they had both bills were cross-referencing one another.
Understood. Yeah,
The purpose of the advisory council was to advise, not direct. We went through all that kind of language. It wasn't to direct the sub-cabinet or anything. It was just to give them advice and to make recommendations, both as to, since this consists of people who live and work in the innovation space of AI and machine learning, that they would be the eyes and ears to say, the state is on, we suggest that the state look at these things. This is coming down the pike. You might not be aware of. You may want to put this guardrail up. They would be making suggestions. So I just need clarification on if you're saying that's no longer necessary, because it's certainly not referenced.
That was not our intent. I don't believe we asked to take out that reference if it was in the bill. My thought was that it was never, that reference was talked about with the group that created the Senate version, but it never made it into the bill. But we would have no objection to that reference being in the bill.
Okay. Delegate Lewis, are you okay if I dig up the reference from, I think, the original reprint that Senator Hester put together and work with Lindsay to put that reference back, or do you feel that's unnecessary?
I'm completely fine with it. I was fine with it before. I think we had it in the uncodified part at the very end, the last I remember on it. I do remember, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I do remember, I feel like Nishant or Brad or someone saying that they plan to pull together this advisory group either way. I want to say is what they said. Almost. So I don't, I can't speak for them, so I don't know if that's indicating that it was needed or not needed, but they indicated that either way they were going to pull together some group.
That is correct.
But I personally am fine. I think it would be easiest to kind of do what we did before, just again in the back of the bill, the uncodified, referencing that there will be an advisory, whatever language is, appropriate to the sub-cabinet folks of a board or council based off of your bill.
Okay, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I can, and if someone will, I can move that we find language to put that back, and I can work with Lindsay to dig up. And I think Delegate Lewis' memory is exactly right. It wasn't the uncodified portion. And I think, in fact, the discussion we had after the hearings with everyone, when we discussed both the bills, he is correct that Ms. Sean had, I think, some issues with, well, we think it might be too big, but I think the whole point was that it was independent of DO-IT. And so the size of the advisory council was really not germane. We felt that their concerns about the size of the council were not germane, because it's not a council that DO-IT puts together. But I do, right, that was the whole point, for it to be independent and be able to give the advice that it can give without feeling that it was reliant on DO-IT's oversight or direction.
The only thing I'd like to add, just because I haven't had a chance to check with you, Delegate Hill, on how your bill has progressed. I think a light reference to the advisory board or council and non-codified, I definitely agree with. I would prefer, as we're entering the last end of session, that we don't get too prescriptive that this becomes like a new fight or something, which I hope you appreciate. Thank you.
No, absolutely. We're not trying to stop this bill or the other one. And I think that was part of what the confusion has been, is because the connection had been lost. So while this was being worked, I mean, the other bill passed out of the House and it's sort of been sitting in the Senate, and it looks like it was not considered as part of the package of bills. Is right now.
Okay, let's do this. Reminding everybody where we are. We have a motion and a second on Delegate Lewis's conceptual amendment to exempt the constitutional officers. as well as the amendments that are included in the reprint. So Delegate Hill, my preference would be for you to
Vote these first, and then I'll move mine again. I
Yeah.
withdraw my motion for now until after we vote on that.
Okay, fine. Mark, something to add to this?
I just one of the things that we were also noting is on page 13, line 23, is where it actually says that the subcabinet is working in consultation with academic institutions and industries. We actually were asking, I think it's in line with the same discussion here of how would that consultation happen? I just highlight that, that might, if this is all related, that might be a place where this could also fit.
This relates to Delegate Hill's idea?
Correct. To this other group and to how it could actually relate to the subcabinet.
Okay, then let's see if we need to come back to that. Delegate Chisholm, is this on these amendments? Something else?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think. So I just wanted to ask, since we have Delegate Lewis here, and thanks for bringing the bill. In the Senate bill, there's a testimony opposed to this bill by Security Industry Association, which is in Silver Spring, which I know you represent, Prince George's County. They were very concerned about some of the terminology and the broad sweeping definitions being used. And I know that Lindsay just went through a litany of different changes to the terminology. So I'm curious to know if either Delegate Lewis or Senator Hester's office has talked to anybody with the Security Industry Association to see if this amendment tightens things up enough to satisfy some of their concerns. They represent 40 different companies in the state of Maryland. It looks like they represent a broad range of AI technology companies, and I wouldn't want to hamstring some of our security AI companies that currently participate in our procurement system, and was curious if anybody's had a conversation with this association.
Daniel Wolf, do you have something to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dan Wolf with the Alliance for Digital Innovation. I'm definitely not the Cybersecurity Association of Maryland, but my trade association does represent just under 30 companies that do business with the state of Maryland on AI and cybersecurity related issues. Speaking generally, we do very much appreciate the general returning the focus to high risk use cases rather than lengthy definitions in safety impacting AI and rights impacting AI. And we do look forward to working with the Secretary and DO-IT on regulations for the detailed definitions and process. One thing that I do want to flag that comes out of that question asked by Delegate Chisholm is that I did notice this morning, looking through the amendments that Lindsay sent out, that on page 9, line 25, the definition for rights impacting AI uses the standard of substantially likely to affect, while the safety impacting AI definition on the next line, on lines 26 and 27 on that same page, use meaningfully impact. I don't know if that was intentional. I do have concerns about these somewhat still vague definitions having different squishy legal standards. As an attorney, that gives me some pause. I don't know what I'm honestly not sure which one's tighter. I believe that substantially likely to affect would be a slightly higher standard, if not perhaps meaningfully or higher standard than meaningfully impact. But I would recommend that the definitions be amended to at least that they both use the language substantially likely to affect rather than having the two different standards based upon those subcategories of AI. That's the balance of my comments, but I'm happy to answer any additional questions the subcommittee may have.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay, do you have a response to that?
I see that they're different. You're right. The only thing I would note, you can choose whichever word you'd like, but I think you might need to keep the word impact because you're referring to the impact the safety of human life well-being. So affect the safety of human life well-being doesn't really work there. And then affect, I think, works better with the civil rights, civil liberties, equal opportunities, but you can change either meaningfully or substantially to
Sorry
whatever.
to interrupt, but
prefers.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Lewis is
Delegate
back in the
Lewis.
waiting room.
Thank you.
Delegate Lewis, did we lose him? He's in the waiting room?
Yeah, he had to switch to his laptop and
Okay.
he's been in the waiting room.
All right, Ann, can you check the waiting room and see if Delegate Lewis is asking to come back in?
I would like to get his opinion on changing the terminology, so it'd be great to get him back in. If indeed that's, you know, the will of the committee to make sure we match it up correctly.
Okay, I may have to step out into the main office to get that done. Hang on, everybody. Okay.
And I just want to make sure, if I could ask a quick question, maybe to Lindsay. We're just making sure that both versions of the bills look the same by voting time, correct?
Yeah, they will.
Okay.
Yeah. We're still trying to find to get Delegate Lewis back into the meeting. Meanwhile, have we made a determination about Dan's point about the different terminology and which way we want to go?
Delegate Hill have an opinion on
I think
that.
we wanted to hear from Delegate Lewis as well before we
Yeah,
decided.
but
But I don't know if he heard the entire conversation.
well,
So
he's not back in the room yet. Damien, do you have anything to add on behalf of Senator Hester?
Definitely. I think it's our intent that the applications are similar to what the federal standard is. The OMB sent out a memo use for AI guidelines for agencies. It was published yesterday. The original version of our AI definitions were what was put into the draft version of the OMB memo. And there's been some slight modifications, but the two being that what constitutes high risk is what is safety impacting or rights impacting. And I can share that memo with everyone if they want to take a look at it. But that was our original intent, was to be synonymous with the federal guidelines that have been promulgated, and just for consistency's sake, have those definitions be within Maryland state law. And then the modifications for use can be determined later on. But those definitions, we believe, need to be established, and then we can determine how they're applied to, you know, vendors or state use or anything beyond that. But consistency in language is what we're looking for.
Lindsay, is that helpful?
I'll have to look at those to see if they use meaningfully or significantly, or perhaps they use both terms as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does it read the same from the OMB, from the federal government, that it is substantially likely to affect civil rights, civil liberties, equal opportunities, and then below it is their definition as well, safety impacting artificial intelligence means artificial intelligence has the potential to meaningfully impact the safety. Is that where the two amendments came from? And do they match up now?
What is in the current OMB version says potential to significantly impact the safety or rights.
Did somebody freeze?
I think we lost the chair and Delegate Jazz Lewis at this point.
They're in their own room.
It's
I
kind
think
of
so.
interesting. It's kind of interesting when we're all this close together that we can't keep the Zoom working.
Okay, we've got Delegate Lewis. Have you been able to follow along with audio?
No, I signed out just as I pressed this, thinking it would be instant. I know we were talking about the definition of high risk. And what I would have said, and I'm sure someone already said, is that it's really punted to the subcabinet to clarify. In truth, there's some guidelines given to it, but the subcabinet will have more opportunity to really define that so that we're not overly prescriptive. But we did say that it should include things that affect safety and rights.
Delegate Lewis, I don't know if you got my question or not, but did you have any conversations? I know we have another association here, but with the Security Industry Association in Silver Spring and some of their concerns, and
No, and they didn't testify on the House bill. I'm not typically in the business of tracking the Senate version, who testifies or not, but they didn't reach out to me. Now, I have spoken to industry on the bill, and I would say this bill is about state government data and state government use of AI. To be clear, it doesn't apply directly to the private sector. Of course, private sector will be leveraged, particularly for the development of AI systems, either off the shelf or things that are unique for us. But I just want to clarify, as we're talking, this isn't something that's like a requirement or something we're just placing on folks. But I think the type of data and uses that government would have and how sensitive that could be, I think we would all agree that we want to make sure there's some guidelines for safety.
Right, and I appreciate that. I think their concern is they represent about 40 different companies in the state of Maryland that probably do have products that are produced in the private sector that are used in our procurement system. And that's the only reason I asked, just to make sure that, if we pass the bill, that it doesn't unintentionally use too broad of terms, but it sounds like some of the other, like Dan Wolf, feels like it's close to getting there. So I just asked you because I know that they're kind of in your backyard. I don't expect you to read the Senate bill testimony, but just curious.
My backyard is Glen Arden, Maryland, Central Prince George's. It's not Silver Spring. It's about 30 minutes away from me. But I would happily to talk to them moving forward. But I think the definition that we use here is broad enough, and I'm sure they'll be in communication with the subcabinet once they start meeting and whatnot on clarification for the language.
Sounds good.
But I do appreciate it.
No, thank you.
We have a motion on the floor to adopt the amendments in the reprint and the conceptual amendment for the exemption for the constitutional officers. Let's go ahead and vote on that motion.
And Delegate Hill's amendment to add in a reference to the entity created under 1174.
I didn't want to pile too much on you at once.
Okay.
Are you able to handle that as well?
Yeah,
Within
and
this?
for everyone's benefit, the OMB definitions use, I just closed it, sorry, use significantly.
Okay, so we have that one sorted out, and you can incorporate Delegate Hill's conceptual amendment with the others?
I
Is it
believe
not-
so. I think she's
Okay.
going to get some language. It's going to be some sort of special section at the end about consulting with that entity.
Okay, is everybody okay if we make that part of this motion? Okay. On the amendments, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to the amendments? No opposition to the amendments on the bill as amended?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the bill as amended. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. Any opposition to the bill as amended? Okay, thank you. This bill and its the Senate and the House companion will move on to full committee for a committee vote. Thanks everyone for your work on this. We have one more bill that I think we can dispatch with fairly quickly. Senate Bill 194, State Procurement from Senator Hayes. Lindsay, can you explain this one?
This bill authorizes the Pricing and Selection Committee for Preferred Providers to grant a waiver under specified conditions to a state or state-aided or controlled entity from the statutory requirement to purchase supplies and services from preferred providers.
Any discussion on this bill? There are no amendments, Lindsay?
No amendments.
Okay, do I hear a motion on the bill?
Move the bill.
Move second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the bill, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition to the bill? Seeing none, we will move this bill forward with a unanimous subcommittee vote to the full committee. And that concludes our work for this work session. Thanks, everyone. This was
To adjourn.
Second.
yeah. Okay, we are adjourned.